Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the April 28th City Council work session. Welcome to our guests here today and people at home. We have 3 items on our agenda today. I should probably say that Councilor Ortiz is out of town, but she'll be back this evening for our Budget Committee meeting. So the first item today is committee reports and items of interest from the mayor, city council, and city manager. And I'll just start that out. I have a list. I really appreciate the opportunity to welcome the troops back home into our community last week in a demobilization ceremony. Over the weekend, I had a chance to go to the Disorient Film Festival, which was outstanding, and Asian films, and trying to stereotype and also really good art. So it was really excellent. Earth Day this weekend, and I had the opportunity at Earth Day. There was a lot of great things at Earth Day, and a lot of people showed up because the weather was great. Able to give the Mayor's Bold Steps Award for bold steps towards sustainability to Sequentia Biofuels for the great work that they do in providing alternative fuel options in our community, and they are a great place for people to work with good wages and benefits, and they've got their green roof, and they've got their bioswale, and they do all the triple bottom line very well, and we appreciate them very much. Read books to kids at Twin Oaks, 4th and 5th graders this week. Went to the Eugene Police Department promotion, and they have an award ceremony coming up this afternoon. And I just wanted to take note of this week I had a call from actually an aide in a school where a young person with autism didn't make it to school, and people were very concerned. And I called the chief, and the police had learned that the young man had a fixation with MX, and so evidently they found that he'd been on the bus all day long, just riding the MX, but they put those clues together and found him and got him home safely. So that's, I'll tell you, when kids who never don't go to the same place don't show up, it's a scary thing for the families and everyone. So I really appreciate the work they did to make sure he got home safely. Was able to honor senior companions yesterday. We have 77 senior companions who work in this city, where seniors helping seniors to be able to stay in their homes and keep their lives moving to get along. So I appreciated that opportunity to honor them. And then yesterday, Betty and I were over at Rite Aid and did the mayor's one-on-one. And I'm just going to tell you really quickly the items that came up yesterday. Were naming the bridge across the Willamette, the smoking at the LTD bus sites, unhappy with Crest Drive, Save Network Charter School, and want everybody to come to hear the new CEO of eWeb a week from Friday at City Club. So those were all the topics from yesterday, right?
And
Betty?
one person who was happy with Crest.
Yes.
You said unhappy, but
Yes, that wasn't his major topic.
we had one of each.
Right. You have other things you want to
Yes, I have a few things.
go ahead?
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll skip the mayor's one-on-ones. I was there.
You can say you had a good time. No.
I had a good time. Kitty was very friendly to everybody who walked by. And everyone was happy to see her there. The assessment committee finished our work. That's Jennifer, George, and I were the committee, and it was an excellent committee. Worked well together, and all you have to do now is vote yes when we come back. On June 23rd, there are a couple of things where we didn't totally agree, but mostly we agreed.
We can talk about a trade.
I was at the Neighborhood Awards thing. That's since last time, isn't it? That was very interesting. One of the awards went to Crest Drive Design, incidentally. I did a police ride-along with Sergeant Gilbert, which I found very enlightening. And I think I've been putting that off for years, and I think now that I've done it, I think everybody should do it. It was worthwhile. The Workforce Partnership Board met last week, and they're doing a lot of good work. I think I've mentioned before that they're working with Lane to try to train people for the new hospital at Junction City, and that's ongoing. There's a lot of cooperation between LCC and the Workforce Partnership, which is appropriate. They decided on the distribution of employee workforce training funds. This is something started by Governor Kuligowski in 2004. And people apply for the awards, and those have all been given there to help people, train them to help them maybe qualify for a better job or become better at the job or retain the job they have and so forth. And there are some criteria that they use to decide who gets the award. It's an RFP and process, and I think it's on very worthwhile. Also planning for a youth program for the summer if the funds are approved. They were approved in a bill approved by the House, but not by the Senate yet. And if the funds come through, the Workforce Partnership is ready to use them to help train youth for jobs. Thank you. That's all.
Jennifer?
Thank you. Okay, Betty mentioned the work of the assessment committee, which I think you'll find very interesting. The mayor mentioned the autistic boy, and that reminded me that I had the opportunity to attend the Bridgeway House auction this year. And the Bridgeway House is an organization locally that helps children and families with autism. And it was a phenomenal event, and I had never been there before, and they have just a great, strong group of supporters, and there really is a need for that service, and they really are kind of out there in front providing services for those families and those kids. So that was just a part of our town that I had not seen before, and it was really a pleasure to be a part of that. My HSC meeting was canceled, and so I'll just wait to see when that is rescheduled. And then I was sorry to miss all of you at the Sarah Palin event. I had a great time. Thank you. That's it.
Pick it up from there, George.
I attended a Human Rights Commission meeting last week, and we went over some working agreements. What you think, it's kind of funny we'd be doing that this late in the game, but it's still a pretty new commission. There's a whole bunch of new people, and so there's one thing we had not done yet, so it was important to go over that. And then that same evening, I went over to the Campbell Center for the Neighborhood Awards, and the mayor was there passing out the awards to worthy recipients, people that are working so hard to make our neighborhoods lively, livable, nice places. That was a lot of fun. Those are the main things.
Chris?
Thanks. I'll go fast. Housing Policy Board meets on Monday, where they'll continue the process of talking about the next round of funding and projects for over in the Westmoreland school area. It's now ESD. So that's going to be really exciting to see the proposals for that. The only other thing I'll mention is there's a poll out for talking about setbacks on West 11th, which is a transportation issue that's been kind of out there bubbling for a long time, and we really need to get some positive action on what we want to do there. So I'd encourage you to get your polls in on that.
The 29th.
Yeah, that's all.
All right. Helen?
I had the opportunity to go to the last board meeting for Randy Berggren last week. He's been the eWeb general manager for over 20 years and has done an amazing job. And a lot of the things that are great about eWeb are a result of Randy's work there. So kudos to him. I think it would be great to invite the new general manager to the city council, do an introduction. If we could arrange that sooner than later, that would be great. Did a sustainability commission meeting on the 21st, talked about the item we're going to talk about mostly. I also went to the 20th anniversary party for the Cascade Raptor Center, which is up on Fox Hollow Road, which is an amazing facility. Louise Himmel and those folks have done just an amazing job. They probably have, 50, 60 birds, raptors, and all sorts of owls, and it was a really fun event for members. And if you haven't been there, I think you should go. It's a really cool place, especially for kids and big kids. And then finally, I encourage people to participate in the upcoming Envision Eugene workshops that we have. And then upcoming meetings. West University Neighborhood is on the 6th. The Amazon Neighbors is on the 12th. The Fairmont Neighbors is on the 18th of May, and the Lower Hull Valley Citizens on the 20th. And as well, I'll be attending the MPC with the mayor on the 13th. And then there's a high-speed rail open house
Right.
coming to town. It'll be at the Campbell Center as well on the 18th from 4:30 to 6:30. So if you're interested in high-speed rail, go there. It's an open house as opposed to a presentation. It's got posters and people to talk to and ask questions and answer questions for.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. I had the chance to participate in the Envision Eugene promotional video that they're making with the mayor, and so we did some some work on that on the 20th, and hope, as Alan mentioned, that people participate in that. The quality of what we come out with will be entirely, I think, driven by the quality of the input that we get from everybody in the city. I had on the 22nd the chance to attend the Cal Young Neighborhood Association meeting with Councilor Polling, and then with Councilor Polling and the mayor also attended the EPD promotion ceremonies 2 days ago on Monday, and we'll look forward to today's commendation ceremony, well earned. I think what we ought to do, and this is just me off the top of my head, at some point I would think that the commendation and promotion ceremonies could be combined and made maybe even a bit more of at the Holt Center or something like that. There are some real brave men and women who serve our community there, and I think we should honor them in that way. So, just a thought.
Thank you. City Manager?
Just a couple of quick things. One, I also was on Friday over at the Lane County Fairgrounds welcoming the troops home, and that was a really nice ceremony and presentation. Reminded me of my old days standing in formation for an hour.
It was a lot of standing, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
that's right. At some level, you just really kind of want to move on, but it was a great ceremony. And then on Monday, we have a firefighter recruit graduation, and I would really encourage, if you have an opportunity to stop by, 1 o'clock, Second and Chambers. You might remember this is our all-female recruit class, which is one, unique for us, and actually we think is probably unique from around the country also. And so this is it's a significant event for us, and so we can take a lot of pride in that.
Great. I didn't actually know that about that. That's great. I did want to we'll wrap this up, but I think I mentioned it maybe before to you, but I just want to remind you that I'm going up tomorrow to Salem for the Super Act meeting, and which is kind of people think, what is that? Well, I do a tap dance, and no, it's not that. It is.
In a way.
In a way. Well, yeah, I do a tap dance. It's
You're verbally.
it's transportation planning groups from all the different regions of the state meeting together, and in this case, we'll be looking at the Connect Oregon projects and ranking them. So that's what I'll be doing, and then I head all the way down the other way to Central Point to meet with all the metropolitan policy organizations that deal with transportation issues for the state. So to one end to the other. So and that's on Friday morning. So be doing both of those. All right. So now on to the next item on our agenda, which is and we have welcome our members of the Sustainability Commission, because we're going to have a work session on land use transportation framework.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm actually going to have Sarah Maderi sit up at the table for the next two items, and so she can introduce those for us.
There are a couple? I'm not sure. It looks like we are going to be joined by Kevin Finney, our Sustainability Manager, and Josh Scove. And Rusty Rexius.
Welcome.
Yeah.
So I want to recognize there's another Sustainability Commissioner in the room, Vice Chair Josh Bruce. So
Welcome.
3 commissioners with us today. I'll just say a few words about why we're here today. We've already introduced the commissioners. And then I'll turn the presentation over to Josh and Rusty. In their FY10 work plan, the Sustainability Commission identified several land use and transportation outcomes that they want to focus on for this year, including linking land use and transportation planning more closely with sustainability goals, researching and preparing recommendations to council on land use and transportation issues. Toward these goals, the Land Use and Transportation Subcommittee of the Commission consulted with experts and interested parties, synthesized the information they gathered, and developed an action plan for Eugene. You have that in your packet today. This paper describes the foundational factors that the Commission identified in its study and provides specific strategies for advancing a vision for Eugene's future. At this point, let's turn it over to Rusty and Josh.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak with you today. A couple of quick opening comments, and I'll just say we're going to do a very brief presentation, essentially material that was in your packet, but then try to leave the majority of the time to discuss all of this. And I'll do a little piece and then hand it off to Rusty, and then I'll conclude briefly. A couple of quick opening comments. First of all, I want to thank the staff support that we've had for the Sustainability Commission. Kevin is outgoing interim, and he's been absolutely fantastic, and we're really lucky to have him and looking forward to, well, we're not looking forward to his departure. Actually, we look forward to his departure with trepidation, but hopefulness. So I just want to thank Kevin, and also thank Kelly, who's been spectacular in helping us as well. And we certainly wouldn't have gotten to where we've gotten without the staff support. And I also just really briefly want to thank council. Just very generally, I have become sucked into many Sustainability Commission and LTD-related activities in the last year, and now I really appreciate the time you put in. So I just want to say that now. So let me give the overall frame for this.
Move over here. George just got.
Oh. We're there. Is this a divide and conquer strategy, or?
Good luck with
Okay,
He gets more table over here.
that's great. Well, Josh has still got my back, I hope. Okay.
Better camera view from there.
All right.
Rusty's
actually-
side.
Kind of threw you off, huh?
No, that was all staged, actually. Okay. So, thank you for the help. So, just the overall frame for this is that, we're coming to you to share a series of insights that, we have wandered to over the last year or so. So I want you to think about it that way. We're here to help. We're here to lay out what we've learned on this issue. We're not here to request particular actions on any particular big decisions that are before you yet, but I really should say yet. Just not yet. Like, maybe we will at some point. We have some big land use, transportation, and land use and transportation decisions to make over the next, over the short term and medium term, and so, that's related to the urgency of our topic today. But we're coming with that kind of spirit of guidance in mind. So, a quick introduction to this issue, and again, a little bit of this is repeat from the packet, but this is actually, I think, context that was harder to weave in, and I'll go back even to before the timeline that Kevin described. So there were issues related to land use, transportation, energy, and climate in what the Sustainable Business Initiative generated, and recommendations that it had for the Commission's first wave of work a couple of years ago. And as we carried that forward, and as we emerged from the initial commission building process, which is very exciting, involving things like bylaws and the like. Once we got out of that phase of creating the commission, I think it's important to point out we've essentially done two groups of things. The first is we have cleaned up and handed on for your approval a series of policy recommendations, all of which the council has approved. But then we also essentially created just one subcommittee for additional topics, and it's on land use and transportation. So I say that just to signal that this, as an integrated sustainability issue, as something where we seem to be missing other governance and maybe need an extra layer of thinking and analysis and policy, this rose to the top. It's not that there weren't other things we wanted to do. Staff had some of these other things covered. We had staff time. thanks to the city manager, on climate and energy action planning. We also have had some food policy work done, but with very limited staff time. Beyond that, we really didn't have time to support another subcommittee, so this was the one thing that we focused on, the challenge of land use and transportation together, especially as it relates to energy and climate issues. So I just want to point out that that was the issue that, the integrated issue that came to the top. And I guess the short version of the punchline is, so we did a memo. And that's what you've seen. But I'd like to turn it over to Rusty to talk about what the Land Use and Transportation Subcommittee did and how we got where we got.
Thanks. So, as Josh said, we got together and decided as a commission that if not the two most important, one of the two most important issues that we could address are this notion of land use and transportation, and then the words that we continue to use then and continue to use is the nexus of the two. And what was a bit of an education for me is, and continues to be, is land use and transportation under the umbrella of this question about climate uncertainty and energy volatility. I'm going to use those two terms a lot. I'm sort of committed to climate uncertainty and energy volatility rather than some of the buzzwords that have been used and have all sorts of connotations. So this question about land use and transportation and how we should look at those two things in relationship to this climate and energy questions, we decided the best place to start was to go and survey as best we could anywhere and everywhere that we knew or could imagine was already going on in the city or outside the city. I don't remember now how many different groups or individuals, institutions or organizations we met with. LTD with regard to MX. We met with the WEC folks, West 11th Corridor Study, Opportunity Siting, met with a private individual regarding electric vehicles and then eWeb over the same issue. The ECLA folks, any place where we could imagine that land use and transportation were being talked about, thought about, and planned for, asking the question, how is it that in those processes are the two pieces, land use and transportation, are they being considered at the same time, and is energy and climate being considered in those decision-making processes? And what we found out was, really in nearly every case, there's not much integration at all. We do great land use planning as best we know how. We do great transportation planning as best we know how. Little is done in the way of connecting the two, and almost none is done with this notion of climate uncertainty and energy volatility in mind. As a side note and anecdotal story, as this was going along in my own business, as we began to strategize and think, I realized that those exact questions are the same thing we do in our business planning. When we're trying to figure out what is our 3 to 5 year strategy, land use and transportation, ironically enough, in our company becomes major issues, and at the top of the list at every single strategy session we have is this question about what does climate mean and what does energy mean to our company. So it seems rather appropriate that in this context those are exactly the same things that would be important to us and we hope are important to you. So our conclusion was great work is being done, but there is little in the way of an overarching framework or policy lens to look through to help make these decisions that connect land use and transportation with energy and climate in mind. So our hope, as we went through this process, is to develop something for council that would give you the opportunity to have a lens to look through and connect these dots and basically find the nexus point between land use and transportation. As an example of where we found this disconnect, I can use a personal one that we talked about, and that was with the West Eugene Collaborative, of which I and others in the room were a part of. I went into that thinking that was a transportation question. There's a whole bunch of cars on West 11th. That's where I work. I spend a great deal of time myself there. It's a mess. There's a transportation problem there, and we need to fix it. I don't think that I had anything in my mind about climate, energy, or frankly even land use. What I came out of that process with, and I would assume nearly everybody else did, in fact I think I can safely say everybody else did, is that actually is a land use and land use and transportation example of two very important features going on that little has been done, and frankly, there is not much of a way for climate and energy to be considered in the planning of the West Eugene corridor. One of the places that became painfully clear is the decision, right or wrong, but the consensus was that Multi-Way Boulevard, there we go. The Multi-Way Boulevard was a preferred alternative for that particular corridor. Whether that's right or wrong, don't want to get into that, but that's what we thought would make some good sense. Well, as soon as we made that decision, land use and transportation became the driving factors in how that would ever make sense. And what we found very soon is, because of the disconnects between our land use planning and transportation planning, what we had envisioned and would like to do, we couldn't. For example, because of the way we have done land use planning and the setbacks, which somebody already mentioned today in the room, what made sense from a transportation perspective, specifically with bus rapid transit or public transit of some sort, and the notion of using land use on its sides for residential and commercial buildup, became impossible because we have our buildings too close to the existing road. We couldn't do what was probably, or at least at this point, can't do what was probably the right thing to do with energy and climate in mind, because our land use and transportation haven't considered each other with the energy and climate in mind. So it was a very eye-opening experience for me personally, and I think those are for the rest of the group that worked on that particular project, that while we do good planning, we don't connect the planning so that we can make good decisions with regard to climate and energy. There are lots of other examples in those areas that we heard from other people where good work is being done, but no great way to try to capture all of our decision-making under one sensible umbrella to make decisions for the good of our community. I think that's enough about that.
That's great. And I'll just tack on a couple of examples. We won't go into the detail that Rusty just did for the WEC. I think that was sort of the one we decided was the best one to demonstrate the challenge quickly. But the MX West Eugene extension under consideration right now, I think it's pretty clear that you can't really say it's only land use or transportation. It's definitely both. We've had a number of discussions about ECLA, and one of the Sustainability Commission members, Howie Bennett, has been our representative on that, on the piece leading up to Envision Eugene, and so we've seen more such challenges there. And I think there are other things that have come before you in the not-too-distant past that look like that as well. I think it's okay to say out loud West University and South University neighbors and parking, but it's not okay to say more than that. So maybe I'll just stop right there. I'll just leave it there. I think it serves its purpose as an example, and we will let it lie. But the point is that these things sort of repeated over and over, and as Rusty pointed out, that really was the big insight from this, that we don't really have policy, we don't have the apparatus of government and of policymaking connected in a way that we can actually address these things the way we might like. So a few quick sort of closing remarks, closing only as a way to open it up for you for discussion. I'd throw out these questions, and this is really our request of you, is to get answers to these questions. How and in what form would you like the Sustainability Commission to weigh in on these issues with you, and how regularly? I mean, I think we're at the point where we need a little guidance on how to provide guidance. There's a lot of interest there, but we're building this as we go, so that would be very helpful. Also, maybe this is a subset of this, should we focus, for example, on requesting particular insights or supporting analysis from staff on certain issues? The disconnect that Rusty so nicely laid out is sort of repeated inside pockets of government and various levels of policymaking where people have very clearly defined roles, but those roles are often missing the integration. So maybe there's a role for us to help you ask for additional guidance from staff. And then I guess the big version of this might be, would you like us to come back to you with guidance or ideas on some sort of decision-making framework that brings these things together? I mean, Rusty mentioned a lens. I think this is, if you can picture the very first lenses that were ground hundreds of years ago to make the earliest versions of eyeglasses. I think that's what our current memo is. So vision is still a little blurry through that. But do you want us to refine that and try to provide a more fleshed out framework that really does drive home these points of integration? And with those quick and easy to answer questions on the table,
The yes/no
throw it
question.
open to discuss. The yes/no questions, exactly. That's right.
Got Alan and then Betty.
First of all, I'd like to thank Kevin for the work that he's done as the interim sustainability manager. Thank you for the hard work. We're going to miss you on the Sustainability Commission, but I'm sure we'll end up with someone that will serve the city really well. That process is out right now, right, for external and internal recruitment. And we're supposed to have one on by, I think, July 1st, is the target. The process that Josh didn't feel like he wanted to talk about, the parking example in the South University and West University neighborhood was another perfect example for me of where there is no process or place to have a conversation about land use issues over here and transportation issues over there, because that parking crosses over those, and God knows we spend enough time talking about parking on the council, and not really enough. So it's that intersection. I think is maybe a more appropriate word for transportation and land use than nexus, and it's that intersection that really is where we need to be spending a lot of time and talking about it. The Greenhouse Gas Task Force that I was appointed to by MPC by the governor, it talks exactly about that. And we, as a community, have to grapple with this issue because of Senate Bill 2001, which required the MPC, the Metropolitan Planning Committee, and the MPO to come up with some scenarios that talk directly about how the intersection between transportation and land use impacts greenhouse gases. And so in that came the task force, which was 1059, which ended up coming up with a phased-in approach, but it said, state, you need to come up with targets, you need to come up with the tools, you need to come up with the funding, none of which we have yet. So the context and the tools we don't have yet. The only other people that are doing this in the whole country is California with Senate Bill 300, and so this is new stuff, but it's really, really important stuff. And I think what we should task the Sustainability Commission to do, because I think they're kind of uniquely positioned here, is to work with the folks that are going to be locally working on this issue through the Senate Bill 2001 work that we have to do by 2013. And then secondly, try to help develop the tools, the processes, and the place for how we have, where we have, and what kind of tools we have to discuss this issue.
Thank you. Betty?
Thank you, and thanks for your remarks. I think we did a good job. I've said that before. I think we did a good job in choosing members of the commission. And are you going to be staffless for a while? You're saying you...
It'll be Finn. Actually, Kevin should answer that.
thought you said he's leaving and
He is
someone's
going
coming
back.
in July.
I'm going, you want to answer?
Yeah, sure. Won't be totally staffless. We have a position posted right now, so there will be some transition time between when Kevin leaves and when the new person's kind of up and running. But we're deeply committed to it. Kelly's the division manager, so she'll fill in with the commission as she needs. And we also have, as you remember, we've built the team that's neighborhood access, equity. That whole team works together, and I know that they're going to, some of the commission support that helps the Human Rights Commission may also help here and has been. So they won't be totally staffless.
And not 10 wild horses could prevent us from meeting, even if we had no staff, I assure you. We will keep doing that.
12.
Well, that's good to know. In answer to your questions, what would we like you to do for us, I think you said. I think if you'd keep in touch with our future agenda and anything we're going to be discussing, it would be good for you to tell us how sustainability should be involved in those things. I would think regular comments or reports would be a good thing. And you could warn us before we do something wrong. If we're thinking of some land use things, for example, that don't make any sense in light of current transportation, I think you would be a good group to let us know what you think about it. I can't read my writing sometimes. Yeah, that's enough, I think, for now, but I think it's really good that you don't just exist out there by yourself thinking of good ideas, but that you communicate them to us. Thank you.
Chris?
Thank you. Tremendous work, and for me, very exciting. It's nice that Rusty really said everything I would have said better than I would have said it, and he was able to take longer than 3 minutes, so that helped a lot to make it easy for me. And I'm already going to shamelessly steal the concept of climate uncertainty and energy volatility. That's great. I won't claim credit for it, but I'm definitely going to steal it. But the notion that we're trying to approach some of these really important issues in new ways, I think, is really a critical benefit, in that the outcome, which we really have talked about for decades, what the outcome we want, it keeps getting tripped up over a process that doesn't quite get us there. We keep getting tripped up as we try to get to this outcome, and for me what's exciting is the common interest that suddenly seems to have come from many people all at the same time that we've got to try a new process because the old one just didn't work. It wasn't getting us there. And I think the notion that there are desperate elements that can come together, actually need to come together.
Disparate or desperate?
Both. Both. That need to come together in order to be able to begin to make progress, I think, is really a critical one. The notion that land use and transportation are so interconnected, I think, is part of what's tripped us up in the past. That we've not seen that connection, or we've been unwilling to see that connection. And now, I think, in a number of bodies, WEC is only an example, this group is another example of the growing recognition that you really can't have one without the other. I'm really encouraged that we can begin to make progress toward that outcome, that a lot of people are strongly invested in getting to that outcome. And it really doesn't have to be about my side winning or your side losing. It really has to be about achieving that outcome that we all believe in. And so that, to me, is one of the most encouraging elements about it.
Mike?
Thank you. I, too, appreciate Rusty's framework there with the idea of climate uncertainty and energy volatility. That's a great lens to look through a number of things. When answering the question, I had a chance to meet with my appointee the other day. We had lunch, Steve and I did, so we could talk about some of this. And in many ways, the work that you're doing and the work that the community's doing in this area broadly, generally, is kind of leading edge stuff. There are not, as Alan has mentioned, there are not a lot of places in the states being taxed with a lot of this stuff, and they are, to a certain extent, searching around. That's great. If you're going to blaze a trail, what you want is a really sharp machete, I guess. If you're going to blaze that trail in the jungle, and so that's what I would answer you is the role I'd most like to see is that there's some concrete pieces of information. It's not for me so much the policy stuff as it is what are the actual real world implications of some of the discussions we're having and some of the policy choices and considerations. So, for example, if Mark Frohnmeyer succeeds wildly and we're all driving electric cars here in the next however many years, I think that's great. That has quite an impact on us getting to this goal we've set for ourselves by decreasing emissions by 50% in 2030, if I have the year right there, what have you. That's a wonderful goal. I want to understand the real-world consequences of that. So if we get to a place where we're going to say we want to see that done by massive increase of electronic cars on the road, okay, so you need 440 in everybody's house, and what's that actually do to the power grid? And what can we actually accomplish with these kind of goals that we're setting for ourselves? Help us understand those kind of implications. If we go to that sort of model, how many gas stations go out of business? What's that mean in terms of employment, which also affects the triple bottom line? So I want to understand some of the consequences of the decision-making process under the constraints of the best information we have, and I think that would be fantastic help. Thanks.
George Brown?
Thank you. Nice presentation, thanks. I just got a couple questions. I see that you consulted all these other people in town and around. And did you have a chance to see what other cities are doing in regard to, transportation and land use and global warming and dwindling energy, conventional energy supplies, and specifically like Portland or Seattle or San Francisco? Because I was just thinking maybe, we're not the only ones facing this problem, so hopefully other people have got a start on it too, and maybe we could follow them a little bit, and not, to save ourselves a little work. Did you find that much work being done in places like that?
Yeah, can I feel that? Just, I guess a quick answer to that question is that we did look at what other cities are doing, and a number of us on the commission are also connected to that professionally. The quick answer is that most of the examples that rise to the top are in cities and metro areas that seem to be at a different scale, and seem to have sufficiently different circumstances that they're tough to use as one-to-one models. So Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, BC, San Francisco, certainly all examples, but there were enough differences it seemed like we needed something else. The other thing, I guess, this isn't an overreach, and Josh Bruce can weigh in on this as well because he's close to a lot of these issues. I think apart from the actual form, Councilor Clark asked, what does this look like? Apart from what the endpoints actually look like, there's also this question of process to get there, and that was really at the heart of what we were asking about, because we have some processes that take us somewhere, and we can't just point at the destination. We also have to talk about how we're actually going to blaze that trail. And so we're trying to focus on both on outcomes and on process.
Okay. Also, I'm assuming that a lot of you guys will be participating in Envision Eugene. Hopefully, yeah. Well, that's one thing you could do. You wanted to know what you could do, and that's a pretty obvious one, because I think you'll be tremendously helpful to have as many of you as possible from the Sustainability Commission involved in that. That'll really be a good thing. Then I just have this is kind of a minute thing, but I just didn't understand it. So at bullet point number 6 on page 117, increase bicycle and pedestrian connectivity, especially linking residential and commercial. The part I didn't understand, remove physical and psychological barriers. Can you just give me an example of what that means?
And I guess just for context before we give detail, this is something that was not just out of the woodwork. This is something that seems to be one of those common strategies or best practices in a whole host of communities. So I guess that's one of the reasons that this was under consideration. I guess there's a distinction there between bike and ped opportunities as a physical possibility, and bike and ped opportunities as something that people even consider, right? I mean, they're just different things. There are, and the grant, and I don't know if you've had a presentation from staff on this, but the city recently received a grant from Federal Department of Transportation, someone know offhand, some combination of federal agencies, I think, on exactly this, figuring out how to foster bike culture so people actually think about the possibilities that are at their disposal. I know it's shocking to learn that sometimes people don't do things that are in their best interest that may be right in front of them, but sometimes that the dots are not connected. So that's what that was referring to, is that it's both an infrastructure issue and a culture or psychology issue.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll chime in here and say, again, Kevin, thank you so much for your work, and we consider you, we just know you're going to take this same dedication to this same issue back to Public Works, right? So that.
Hoping to that, yeah.
I agree with the comment that Alan made about the work we're doing with the greenhouse gas, and that we need your involvement in that and in the ECLA processes. Are both huge things that and it need some integration, actually. And we're going to have a presentation fairly quickly on all the different kinds of plans that we're going to be looking at, and we have to put those in some kind of integrated framework for us to to do this. And the other thing for me, Josh, is we are trying to learn how to use the triple bottom line lens to look at everything we do. So how does this lens fit into the triple bottom line lens that we're already committed to using? That's
Can I take a shot at that just very quickly? Because in some sense, we've spent a lot of our time and asked many staff, and many staff have really dived into this and helped out to build a triple bottom line framework or tool or decision-making process, et cetera. So you might look at this and say, what? Another process before we've completed the other one? I guess I would encourage you to think about it this way. If you're going to look at what is, upon reflection, clearly a land use and transportation challenge, somewhere at the nexus, as Rusty said, at the intersection of land use and transportation. If you were to look at that through a triple bottom line framework, I think what we're saying here is energy and climate issues would be a lot of the detail that you would fill it out with. That doesn't mean that there wouldn't be some other environmental health concerns. It doesn't mean that there wouldn't be social equity implications. There would. But I guarantee you, from what we've been through, it's very clear that energy and climate are going to show up.
totally agree.
So I think at some point these things confuse. It's just that you all have some big land use and transportation decisions coming down the pike here quickly, and we wanted to weigh in on that specifically.
A couple other comments I would make is, speaking to the parking issue and all of that, I find in this work we do at council all the time that you have good purposes and goals that run in smack into each other all the time. And one of the things that we wrestle with is when those run into each other, where do we end up? And it's those are not purely good or bad decisions. They because you've got a goal coming from this direction and you've got a goal coming from that direction, and you have to find some way to try to meet both of those in a way that is responsive to those different demands, and those are hard decisions. We don't always hit it on the mark, but we understand the conflicts. I wanted to say I appreciate especially your outreach to meeting with the Planning Commission. I think it's great for them to have you helping them with that framework for their own decision-making. That's part of that. I think that's part of building the lens, frankly. So the only other comment I wanted to make is that, for me, if we can look at these things that you're suggesting, and you can help us with some of the, not only some of the strategies, but how to measure them, so we know, because we're doing some of all of these things. So how far are we already on the road to these, and then what's the next bar we want to reach, and then to measure them. So your bike conversation is a case in point. We do a lot of work on it. We have a bike summit. We have a plan. I think we want to see how far are we moving on that, and then what's the next bar to aim for, and to have you help us with that conversation. Anybody else? Alan?
So, without letting them get away from us unscathed with more work, does anybody object to having the Sustainability Commission put on their work plan the development of the tools and processes for the city to have discussions and decisions around this issue, around the intersection of transportation and land use?
Seems reasonable.
Because really,
I think John wants to.
For example.
John wants to talk.
I guess I would just want to understand a little bit more about that, so maybe we can have a little bit of conversation first, just to understand sort of how that interacts with staff and some of those. So I'd like to have the conversation, but I'd suggest maybe we just have a little conversation.
Yeah, I know, we need to figure out the resource side, but there is no place in the city other than the work group that's working on the Senate Bill 1000 for MPC, which involves some city staff already. There's no place for this conversation to occur. And I think it would be appropriate for us to plunk it in the Sustainability Commission area in order to land it somewhere. Because issues that don't land somewhere within the city don't get dealt with. That's my experience. So that's why I would like to have it land here. open alternative options, but
I'd like to think about that, because I think it's got to be part of all these planning processes that we're going to have. It has to be, some way, it has to be built into the work that's ahead of us. I think Sarah's going to...
I was going to recommend that, given what we've heard today and what you're suggesting, Alan. We are going to be back on May 10th to try to do a little bit of what you've presented. Is there are a lot of different planning processes going on around land use, transportation, other things as well that kind of link up with the social equity and land use transportation piece. So we're coming back on May 10th to try to give you in a big picture how those things are linked up and what we see as the current framework around them, and that might be another good opportunity to just talk about, is there something we need to shore up, and how could this help with that?
I just can't imagine how we could even have those discussions without addressing this issue. The question is, how can you be helpful to us in that process and hold us accountable to it? Yes, John.
Yeah, so two just really quick things, and thank you for bringing up the Sustainability Commission, Planning Commission joint work. I didn't mention that because we're focusing on the issue at hand and other things, but it is worth mentioning that we are forming some sort of joint task force with the Planning Commission, and I say some sort of because we are still defining its charge a little bit, but the Planning Commission was very enthusiastic to figure out how to incorporate these issues in what they're doing. So there'll be more. We'll hear more on that. And I guess the other thing is, I've spoken at a very high level with all of this. I've responded with some detailed examples. You must understand that is against my personality and character. I'm a details guy, so it's actually been a tremendous act of restraint for me to do that. And then Councilor Clark offers these tantalizing questions about the details. Very seriously, if there is a way for us to weigh in on a regular basis with answers on some of the details, we found that sometimes distorted pictures or misconceptions sort of start in the details and work their way up to policy. And if there's any way that we can participate in some sort of ongoing discussion, that would be great. I will continue to act with restraint on the things you bring up right now. But I think having some sort of open channel there is kind of a subset of this question of how do we weigh in as a commission on an ongoing basis.
And my response to that, too, is that as much as we will listen and rely on you for all the information we will be asking of you, you just have to bear in mind that we ultimately might not agree with you. And that's just part of the deal, too. And by the same token, I would also say that, like when you brought to us your suggestions about how the STIP-U money would be used, I think because you did that, it didn't end up exactly the way you came and asked for it, but because you brought it, it changed the outcome of the decisions that council made. We made decisions that incorporated, better incorporated bike usage into those projects, and that was what you brought that. You surfaced that in a way that wouldn't have happened without you. So I think that's a very important role. But I always have to do that caveat thing of we ask for advice and sometimes we take it and sometimes we don't. But we try to utilize it. Yes.
And I was just going to add. I know that as you kind of described land use and transportation and the intersection, that the triple bottom line framework doesn't necessarily the perfect fit to evaluate that. I would say that the work of the Commission and the work of our internal sustainability people has been exactly that. Use the triple bottom line framework and tool to bring the Sustainability Commission and their work and priorities into every decision. And that's why we're going to be incorporating it into all of the AISs, and it's been kind of testing, and I think we're going to talk about it a little bit tonight at the budget presentation. Great. And how we've considered some of those things. So the intent really is to make it, everything you're looking at should have that evaluation. And what we really need to figure out is how you just get more kind of regular updates from the Commission. So I think we can on that.
Alan, you want to say something before?
So just to be clear, so on the May 10th planning processes agenda item, part of that is going to be where does this intersection between transportation and land use fall, and how do we deal with it within the city? At least an initial stab at that.
I think that's, well, part of the intent of it was that you keep having these conversations about how does this fit with that, and how do these things relate, and how are staff working together, and how are you considering this when you're deciding that. And so that is the intent, is to bring it all forward, show you kind of on one map where we're at with everything and how people are intersecting. If it's not enough, then we'll take recommendations on how we might expand that.
Okay, because there's no place this lands, so
Right.
it needs to land somewhere. Thanks.
So as a result of this meeting and this conversation today, we'll be sort of interested in what you take away from this, and then how you want to go, and in conversation with staff, how we can better utilize your talents, and you can feel that we were able to offer as much as you'd like to offer to our city decision-making process. So,
Well, and just a clarification, I still feel sort of unscathed, so I'm not sure exactly what to take in this.
Feel lucky then.
You're unscathed
For now. Is there some way that we should show up even just to listen for the May 10th discussion? Is that appropriate? I mean,
Sure.
This is before our next meeting as a commission,
Sure.
so I want, okay.
and looking at Kevin here, I'd also say that maybe this is, as we think about who we recruit for the job, somebody with some sort of expertise in this area might be helpful too. Yeah. So.
Yeah, good idea.
And at least they would know that this is something that we have, sits on the plate pretty high. So. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Thank you very, very much. We appreciate the work you're doing, and we appreciate this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Item number 3, the new item that we have on our newer version of our agenda, and that is a redesigned homepage.
Yes, Mayor and Council. So I think Jan's going to run us through a demo of the city's homepage, and I was just going to frame it, and I know you know, I don't know.
That right here, as a matter of fact.
Oh.
But I can't get
Are you
the
gonna do
agenda
the
for
framework
these to
content?
pop up,
Okay.
other than that.
I'm just going to turn it over to Jan.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Just to put this, I mean, I'm so often here and so rarely here, so it's kind of a new experience for me recently. Just to put this in context, as you know, we've been talking about for some time the need to replace the entire platform of the city's website that we call the portal. And we have started that process. We have a staff team that's just beginning to get underway and look at that. And the timeline for that is probably that we'd actually be up and running by the end of 2011. So it's a process that will take some time to determine all the needs and the possibilities and all of that. So in the meanwhile, unless there are more that you wanted to say about that, we wanted to address some of the comments that we've heard from you and from the community, and that, you know, people in the city just are experiencing, to give the homepage, primarily just the homepage, a newer, fresher look, make it a little bit easier to follow, a little cleaner, and also to, you know, kind of simplify, streamline it, and try to better represent the community personality, which was one of the things that we heard from some people. We're also working on strategic communications planning that you guys have been talking about. And again, in a process of doing that, we do have a staff group working on that. We did some interviews with folks out in the community, and these were things we heard back with, through that mechanism as well. So we wanted to do something that we could do fairly quickly, and we were somewhat constrained by the existing portal technology. But these were some things we thought we could do, and we wanted to give you a look at them and hope you like them. And still, things can be, you know, moved and tweaked and whatnot. So if you have thoughts, please let us know. So I'll just give you a little quick tour, and then we can talk about it for a minute. So First of all, we just try to, like I say, kind of generally clean up the appearance. Actually, I should mention a couple things. Kim McCrae from Information Services is here. Kim helped us to actually implement all these things. Jeffrey Flowers, a graphic designer, helped us with the look of it, and we had a few other people helping as well and giving input. We cleaned up the buttons. If you remember, a bunch of picture buttons on the right-hand side that were kind of all different, had different looks to them, so we tried to make those much simpler and streamlined. And we actually increased the font size for these where we could. We were a little constrained to do that in the middle, but just to make them a little bit easier to see and read. So we have many of the same buttons. We just took a few out that seemed like they weren't needed to be right on the home page anymore. And I'm not sure if I can navigate down here. Can I? There we go. Okay. And on this side, we added a video gallery. And I think I'll wait and go to that in a minute, but I'll show you how we get there and what happens. We expanded this photo banner here to 3 photos that circulate through, and put a few new photos in there, and we can add new photos and change them as we want, and that circulates through. And one thing you may notice is that we changed, although we couldn't, without a whole bunch of work, change the basic look of the overall banner, we were able to change the words from World's Greatest to A Great City for the Arts and Outdoors, which is kind of our version of that slogan that we're using now more frequently. And then another big change or addition is this box here at the top. We wanted to be able to have an area that really highlights the big topics that the mayor and council are working on, and we can change those as we like. We wanted to keep this fairly simple and have these be topics or issues that have further information in the website. So we're not creating a whole bunch of new information for this purpose, but for example, with downtown and with Envision Eugene, those two are some obviously some high importance issues for you, and they have their own website. So the titles there are links, just gives a little abstract, and then the title is the link to the other web page where people can find more information. And we will be checking in with the mayor, every couple of weeks or so, whether we should be changing these. And if any of you have thoughts, requests, please just let me know, and we'll try to accommodate things there. We don't want it to grow too big. That's the thing with all of these on the homepage. We try to keep it to 2 or 3 items in each of these sections. So if we have new things to add, we'll try to cycle things through. And then the other thing we did here was to add a link to a page that's existed for ever since we went to the portal, but I think a lot of people just didn't know it was there. There's a few clicks in, and it has a lot of information that people are frequently looking for: the city council agendas, the public meetings calendar, the city newsletter. So we'll just click there, hopefully. Oops, I shouldn't have clicked twice, probably now. And so if folks go in here, then they can easily see when are the next meetings. They can get to the council agendas either there or there. They can see the public meetings calendar here, see the city council newsletter. And also at the bottom of this page, our current news releases, we also have those in the newsroom too, but it's just another place to feature those so people can find.
The newsletter, Jan?
I'm sorry, let's go right back here. It's a little hard for me because for some reason this button doesn't want to show.
At the bottom, isn't it?
Yeah, it's there. So we put the two, they're right there. So we put the 2 things at the top, the council meetings and the public meetings calendars at the top, and then the newsletters next.
What happened to
That was
departments
painful.
that used to be over
That
here?
was painful.
Yeah, well, I'll show you.
Redirects that are
Now I'm stuck again. Okay, here we go. It's the mouse for some reason.
directs in the browser settings.
Is it? Huh. Uh-oh.
Losing your signal?
Okay, it's just slow, I guess. I'm impatient.
I get this a lot.
All right. Departments seemed like one of the things that people didn't use as much, and there are a couple of other different ways that people can get to that same place.
How you get to the library?
Well, here, we
I've
kept
gotten
these
to the
two.
library.
Well, maybe that's one way where some people have developed a habit of a certain navigation. There are other ways to get there, but if that turns out, most of the folks we consulted with didn't feel like that was a very frequently used piece, but maybe it is. So if you go here,
Select from the menu to jump to a specific department.
I know, I'm trying to get there. But it's, yeah, that's where most people go, is through quick links.
That second one down there, Quick Links,
I'm
that's got a
sorry,
huge
I just
list.
can't make it work.
Always go departments over here, and then it comes
Enormous
up
list of
library.
stuff.
And
It's in alphabetical order.
It's pretty quick and easy to go. Let's try this now. It's just,
That is a big list, isn't it?
so there's services and departments in here, all kinds of things, and that's the way that most people navigate.
Makes it a
Library's
lot
in that
harder
list.
to get to the library.
You get to the library, Betty?
Okay.
It's in that list.
Usually five.
I know, but you have to go all the way down.
All right, and so,
The teachers are over there in that corner.
okay. So, I think that a lot of people do use this frequently requested services. That's a pretty short list. And then many people use this to get into other parts of the organization. And then there are also still the same tabs at the top. We didn't change really any of the basic structure. The same tabs run across the top here. And then we did add this Get Involved section so that we can feature things that may come and go, where we're particularly trying to get people's involvement either in like workshops or so on, or surveys even. We found that we were starting to have a lot of those, and so these items can change too. We want these to be a little more visual and graphic rather than just an article. And the city news section and the events and activities sections are staying the same. So I think that's everything on the homepage except going to the video gallery. So we will feature a video here, and this can change whenever we want it to. This is the one that's really just a kind of a photo montage with music that we did for the Olympic trials. But we can change those. I think we're working on some videos for Envision Eugene. We may decide that should go on the homepage for some time. So the featured video will be here with a little abstract. And then these videos mostly are, again, trying to, it's just, there we go. Come back. Well, maybe we'll look at this one. These are clipped from the Working City program. And so each of the departments got to choose a couple of their favorite, more recent ones, and we cut those out as individual segments because we thought that would be of more interest to people to know what the topic was really about than just, here's a Working City and here's the date. So any of these, if you click on them, then you can watch that video.
Can we watch
I
us,
think
watching us? Watching
Pretty
us?
soon? Weird. Okay.
It takes a while to load.
Go to the webcast.
That's what I'm doing here. It isn't working. Watch us, watching us.
Well,
watching us.
I think it shouldn't take that long. So we'll check on that. We'll see how that's working. It worked all right at my desk. So
I think in here it takes a while to load.
it may be just partly the wireless in here as opposed to, and people are going to be accessing from outside. So that's interesting. But anyway, that is really what it is.
See what comes
Any
up.
other questions or
Sound.
comments? Or sorry, the video feature didn't work just right here. There we
Any
go.
questions, anybody? Comments?
Showing the screen. and
Thank you. I actually like the rotating, I think it looks much more lively than it used to look, so I appreciate that. And
You can hear it, but you can't see it.
I can see it.
Yeah, you can see it, but you can't hear it.
That's because you guys are on Mac. You need to
Discrimination.
upgrade.
Is that it?
there we are.
Uh-oh.
It's
Yeah,
just
see,
doesn't
you
pick
can
it
see
up.
it, I can hear it. That's it.
It's a tape delay.
About another minute, they'll see you wave. Yeah.
The live part doesn't work.
So we wanted to make sure you just knew how this worked, and if you get comments and questions. Yeah,
Patty still
Patty.
wants to know how you get to library.
Okay.
It was really easy. You just
Quick
go over there,
links.
departments, and you go over there and click
Scroll down.
library.
Quick links.
We'll have to scroll down now.
South on
You don't have to
Charlotte.
you can do
the
that.
links to service. How do I do that?
And you can also bookmark it once you get there if you want. You can just save that page.
Can you go back to the how do
Just
I?
wave.
Okay.
So we are on a 2-minute tape
Frequently
delay,
requested.
just in case we do anything.
Is it
we
under
should-
there too? Actually, library catalog, browse the library catalog, but that goes straight to the
And
catalog.
then you're right on the library page.
But nobody's watching it to cut it short.
So that's really
I actually
short.
have a question there.
Yes, Mike?
You mentioned the end of 2011 as a point to switch off of the portal and to have this based in another system. Will there be a functional redesign by then of any major scale?
Of the, yeah.
The
so-
look of the design of the thing.
Well, the whole idea is, right now, we have to leave the, and I think Kim's here, so she could probably give us more detail on that, but we're going to have to leave this portal system because they're not going to offer the same kind of service support maintenance.
Right.
So what we're doing right now is we've put a small team of people together that are going to start working on developing an RFP to look for another provider. We're also looking at some of our current hardware, software capabilities we have to see if those can meet the needs. And that team will work together to select eventually a design replacement with a lot of input from our outside users, our inside users. And then the end of 2011 is really kind of a, when do we get everything
Right.
moved over and live? Because we have a lot of pages and a lot of documents. So there'll be some interim steps.
Well, I asked that too, as everybody knows, Kim knows, that the speed of technology changed at the
Right.
end of 2011 could show us a whole other kind of paradigm in how people use this sort of technology. For example, I'm wondering, are we looking at how to integrate, if not the whole of our website, at least portions of it that are highly used in any kind of mobile technology?
We'll be looking at all that. We're not looking for the greatest website of 1985. We're looking for the greatest website of 2020.
I
He
got
wants
it.
to watch the webcast on his iPhone.
Yeah.
No, I'm just thinking that's the direction that a lot of people are moving, and so I'm wondering if we're going to be able to be accessible to them in that way as well. So, thank you.
I just wanted to bring up the issue of driving people toward our website. Yeah, as you make it more usable, how we get people to think about it, other when they want to know a code or something. I'm wondering when we have our notices for council meetings or something, whether you want to include in that some kind of link to the city website, just kind of an invitation for people to come to it for information.
Yeah.
I just think it's not something, maybe I'm wrong, but I still feel like there's a lot of people who just don't think about using our website routinely. Yes, Chris?
Just something, I went to the library portion, and I noticed that there's what appear to be ads on here. Are we selling ads to help underwrite the cost of the website?
No. I mean, that's, I'm not
These are just like community services or something?
Yeah, we'll have to get back to you on that. I don't.
not sure.
Okay, I just was
familiar with
curious,
that.
because a lot of websites obviously sell ads as a way to help underwrite the cost of being able to maintain and keep the site up. I just was curious what our involvement was, or whether
Interesting.
there was any involvement.
Pretty soon you'll be back to selling our chairs again, right?
Right?
Team uniforms?
Yes, team uniforms.
Within reason.
Within-
everything's possible.
City council.
All right.
All right, thank you very much, Shan, for bringing us up to speed on that. We appreciate the work that's been done, and we'll look forward to when we make the big shift, but I think it looks great.
Great, thank you.
Anything else, anybody?
Yeah, that's what I was curious.
All right, we're going to thank you all for being here.
The library program.
It's a library program.
It's a library program.
Because it says right,